You're listening to the Echo Ratings Eventing Podcast, the show with a light-hearted look at the eventing world, all of the big event previews, reviews, and special guests, and of course, backed up with all of the key Echo Ratings stats. Welcome to the Echo Ratings Eventing Podcast. Welcome to the Echo Ratings Eventing Podcast. And listeners, we have got another Horse Heroes episode for you. And this is one that you guys have been asking for. Catherine, this horse is a bit of a legend, and I'm really excited to look back on what was an extraordinary career.
He's one of those horses that I think everyone who saw him jump, particularly about jump across country fence, will always remember. And the person who rode him is one of the people I respect most in the sport. So it's lovely to be here.
It's like a double whammy of brilliance. I'm looking forward to this so much. The horse in question had nearly 2,500 British eventing points throughout his career. He had 11 four-star completions. He was the British Pathfinder at 4 consecutive championships, including the London Olympic Games. It is, of course, the wonderful Opposition Buzz, and we are joined by the lady who piloted him on all of those occasions. Welcome to the show, Nicola Wilson.
Thank you very much.
Oh, we cannot wait to pick your brains on Dodi because he was such a legend. He had such a fan club in the sport. And every time we have mentioned to our listeners, oh, do you know what? Who would you like to see on Horse Heroes? His name gets thrown into the mix. So I'm so pleased that we can finally do it. He was bred by Rosemary Search, who owned him throughout his career. He was by Fleetwater Opposition. Tell us a little bit about the early days, because he came to you as a young horse back in 2004. But what were your first impressions of him?
Well, as you say, he was bred by Rosemary Search, and I think delivered also, or helped delivered by Rosemary, who said that actually he was the ugliest foal that she'd ever seen in her life. So he really was the ugly duckling, as she used to say, that turned into a swan. So she did a lot of his early work with him, and Tracy Dillon also. And then he came to me as a 6-year-old, and he had an awful lot of power. He had a really interesting canter. He found the canter very, very difficult. And I remember playing with him over some poles when she brought him over for me to try, and put over some poles in a jump. And I thought, wow, what power over a fence, but gosh, what a different technique. And what a weird way of going. So it was, he was a very interesting horse to work with from the very beginning. He had lovely, fabulously big ears and a lovely kind eye, and had so much power. And it was an interesting place to start from, really.
What was he like as a character?
He was a very kind horse. He didn't really like very much fuss made of him, to be honest. He had a very sort of a quiet stable within the yard, and that's where he liked it. He would always be there with his head over the door wanting his breakfast and everything, but then he was quite happy just to go and relax at the back of his stable and not have too much fuss. He loved however having his bum scratched, so the top of his bottom, he was very partial to that. And Lynn Swift, who was my head girl and looked after him for all of his career, they had a fabulous partnership between the two of them, as well as I did on the ridden work.
And Nicola, what was he like to compete in those early days?
Well, he was always incredibly brave cross country, and he would just so honest and pick up the flags, and he just loved it. But the reason he actually came to me was I used to ride a horse called Mr. Bumble, who was a thoroughbred, and he was very fast cross country. Well, he was probably only fast because I couldn't stop him. But anyway, he was fast, and Dodi was getting time faults as a young horse, and Rosemary wrote to me and asked whether I would consider riding him, which of course I was delighted to. But he was far from a slow horse, but he had to learn to be fast, because he would see a fence, and although he was always jumping the fence, he would suddenly drop the bridle and at some point, usually quite a long way out, just literally take off. And it was a case of sort of sitting with him. He didn't have a natural bascule. It wasn't a natural flow over a fence. And I suppose I had to learn, to sort of take off with him and hopefully land with him at the other side. But it was the most peculiar feeling, which actually stayed with him all of his life, which gave him the most fantastic ability to take off from anywhere, a long way off, if he was going quick enough, or get close enough, and he could just, like a helicopter, just literally take off and land. And often he would land with his back feet first, which was most uncomfortable. But I suppose for him, he had such powerful quarters and back end that he preserved his front end tremendously. So he, through his entire career, was putting the least amount of pressure on those front legs as possible, which was just how he went.
I mean, I can picture him now. Yes, his sort of, I think someone said he took off like a jump jet in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. He did, and with his jumping, it was sort of I really honestly didn't know how to go, how to progress, and I didn't know how to tackle the jumping with him. He was clearly very bold, and clearly, he was very careful, but it was mainly the show jumping that I really struggled with, because of this technique. He would find distances quite long, and often with the parallels, he would struggle with the back rail. And I know at home, and even now, a lot of the broken poles were actually from him, because if they were back rails of an oxer, and he struggled because he didn't make a natural shape, he just went up and down, and I didn't know how on earth I was going to get him to travel for the back rail. And anyway, with help from various people, the answer was actually to go faster. In his jumping phase was to literally have a very, very high tempo and just keep coming. And that was how he became a quick horse, because, when I was on top of the fences, I was still kicking away, saying, come on, we've got to keep going. And that became instinct to him and our partnership. And certainly the scope was never an issue. And I remember doing many massive wide fences and in the show jumping and across country, and him taking them very, very much in his stride.
It's interesting, isn't it, that actually, I mean, we always think of him as being a very, very brave horse, but you had to be very brave as well to ride him like that to get the best out of him.
I think I've always perhaps been quite brave cross-country rider, but I think I had such trust in him. Although he did it in a very strange way, I trusted his ability, and he was so honest and always wanted to do the job, and he got so much thrill and buzz out of it. He just lived for it. And I suppose, like everything, it's that partnership, isn't it, when two individuals become one. And it was an incredibly special partnership that Dodi and I had, and I trusted him enormously, and we had a great deal of fun. And and it's just knowing your teammates, isn't it, really, and being able to work together as a team, and sort of knowing where I needed to be his handbrake, because he'd be a little bit too keen, a little bit too excitable, and think he was invincible, which often happened, and certainly got more and more like that as he got older. He felt he was invincible, so I felt as if I was becoming more and more his handbrake, at times, just making sure that actually, no, you can't go that fast, and no, you cannot be as bold as this. It was just a case of sort of turning his head a little bit to the outside and saying, steady, 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 we've got to go at the correct pace to answer the question. And that he did time after time after time, and what an absolute joy and pleasure he was. But when he dropped the bridle and decided to take off, sometimes it was a little bit hair-raising. I do remember at Aachen, we jumped into the water, and there was quite a sizable step out of the water at Aachen to two massive big hedge boxes. And I suddenly just had this heart-stopping moment, and he dropped the bridle, and I just thought, no way, you're not going to take off here. Well, when a horse drops the bridle like that, there is there's as a rider, there is absolutely nothing you can do. And he just took it off. And I thought, no way are we going to make this. And he did. And I thought, is his back legs actually going to get up onto the top here? And they did. And I felt his back legs land. And I just kick. And he picked up the two massive big square oxes. And from a sort of almost a standing start, just boom, 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 and away he went. And he had such enormous honesty, heart, and power, and desire to do the right thing, which was an absolute pleasure.
And the flat work, Nicola, I mean, it got better and better, didn't it? It isn't necessarily something that he found the most exciting thing in his whole life. You got the impression, but as a partnership, you really improved, didn't you?
Yes, we did. We got better and better. To begin with, most of his dressage career, I really struggled to actually even get him to work down the rein and work over his back, to work to a contact. And he had a very difficult walk and also a very difficult canter. He had a lot of lovely presence in his trot and a lot of spring in his trot, but he did find very uninteresting, the dressage, and also very difficult. I suppose as he got older and we got better and he got stronger, and he did find it easier and easier, and his marks did get better and better until the last few years he was doing a really solid and a very good test. But yes, he did find it very, very hard.
And obviously his cross-country talent was evident, but you took him on in 2004. He went to his first 5-star in 2007. When did you think, this horse could go all the way? Was that evident early on, or did he keep surprising you?
No, actually, he did keep surprising us because his very unique way of going. I was still inexperienced. Yes, I'd ridden around Badminton and Burghley quite a few times on Mr. Bumble and Skyver, but he was such a unique horse. I actually didn't think he would go beyond intermediate, and a couple of very well respected trainers had also sort of said that as well. And and I suppose it just goes to show how partnership and trust in a horse that has that much desire to please and actual scope, how things can become possible. We did our first advanced, let's just try it. With Rosemary, we chatted it through, and she said, well, let's just try and see whether he's up to it. And it was at Whittington Manor, his first advanced, and he absolutely ate it up. He flew round, I think double clear, and he was second. So that was sort of the turning point, because up until that point we really didn't know. And then he went to Bramham as a 9-year-old and was green but went very well. And I suppose from then on you sort of think, well, where is this little horse going to take us? And as it happened, he took Rosemary, his owner and breeder, and myself and our support team. He took us all the way around the world with lots of lovely, fabulous memories and experiences. And I owe him so much.
How was that first badminton with him? Because that was only the year after he'd gone to Bramham. So I think he went as a 10-year-old in 2007 to badminton. He finished 16th, but the bit that stands out for me, and actually it becomes evident as we go throughout his career, as we'll talk about, clear and inside the time cross country on his badminton debut. That must have been exceptionally special.
It was lovely. I remember at that stage he wasn't strong cross country, because remember, he was not all that fast to begin with, and so I just went round badminton and snaffle, thinking, well, because that was that's what I'd gone in. But he was just phenomenally brave and so clever. With as I said earlier, with where he could take off, he could just deal with it. And that's how he went round badminton. And of course, because of his unique way of jumping, I needed the pace, I needed the speed to get the job done, to make it easier for him and for both of us to answer the question. So I suppose the speed was as a consequence of how I needed to ride him to actually jump the fences. If I actually can't remember whether he was clear, whether he was inside the time. I know he was clear, but if he was inside the time, well, that would be a consequence of having to ride him, in that particular way.
In 2008, he finished 7th at badminton and then 5th at Burghley that autumn. And then the following year, 2009, he won. Well, he went to Kentucky and was 11th. Won Blair. Well, that's cool, isn't it? Because some great horses go through their careers without having an international win, and actually, it matters a bit, doesn't it?
Oh, it was lovely. He so deserved that, and I always thought that Gatcombe, the British Open, would be a lovely one for him to have won. But I think the best that we did was second. But he had a fabulous, lovely win at Barbary, and at Blair. And yes, it's really, really special for a horse like that who had such heart and passion and desire for the sport and sheer excitement when he was going cross country. It's lovely that as you say, that he had some wins to his name as well as helping with the British team and winning some medals.
Well, of course, and straight from Blair, then back in 2009, the next thing he did was go to Fontainebleau for the European Championships, and that was his senior team debut, but I think your senior team squad debut as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I think I remember at Fontainebleau walking the course, and there was lots of difficult questions that I was naturally worried about, as you would normally be. And then the draw for the British team was quite late, so there was quite a few combinations that had already been cross country, and it was causing carnage. And I don't think there was I don't even think there was a clear round at that point. And then I followed Michael Young on Sam. I think it was their debut as well. And he flew round inside the time. And then Dodi flew round inside the time as well. And that was just phenomenal. And at that point, because I suppose the extra pressure of riding for a team, it was my first championship. And I suppose I was really quite buzzed, as was he. Coming into the last water, I remember thinking, I definitely do not. I need something stronger than a snaffle. And I remember having to sort of bounce him with the crowds a little bit just to steady him up, because I could not go into that final water at the speeds that he was still going at. So eventually I got back to a pace that was safe enough to jump into the water. But oh my God, what a fantastic ride he gave me, and what a fantastic ride he gave me through his entire career. He was superb, and it was such a joy to come home clear inside the time, and have nailed that on our first championship was exhilarating, I have to say, and a dream come true.
It became a bit of a trait of his championship career of going out as pathfinder for the British team. Did you enjoy it, that first moment when the team said you're out first, Nicola? What were your thoughts?
Oh, it was such an honour and a privilege, and I was absolutely delighted. It was what I dreamt of, is to be on the British team as a child. And I really didn't mind where I went as long as I was on that team. And you know your horse. You've had many, many, many years with them, and he was my trusted partner in crime, I suppose. And when I walked the course, I sort of knew what I needed to do, and I understood how we needed to go, and I suppose I just got on and did it, really. So it didn't really matter that I was going first, but the further through his career, of course, the expectation on him or on us was, oh, well, you'll be fine, you'll go clear, you'll be clear inside the time. And I suppose with that comes that extra pressure. So it did get more difficult later on, just because of the expectation. And I was thinking, gosh, I hope we do, I hope we can, I hope we do, which he always did. You have that little bit of extra expectation all of the way, don't you? And trying to keep his enthusiasm a little bit under bay, really, so we could get the job done.
And you went to another Europeans in 2011 at Le Moulin, and then 2012 Well, that was, what should we say, a hell of a year. Tell me, I remember so well seeing him set off at London. Tell me about London. And it seemed to me, because we knew it wasn't going to be a huge cross-country course, and it was so far within his capabilities that he sort of just, just, it's a cliche to say he made it look like a pony club track, but he did.
Oh, he did. He skipped around, and I know the terrain there was quite difficult, wasn't it? With the camber and such like. But it was amazing. Warming up, he was very, very buzzed up in the collecting ring, understandably, because you climbed up the hill onto the top where the start was from the stables, and it was just, I've never seen so many people. It was just a sea of people, and you just suddenly, you're quite calm down at the bottom, and you know what you have to do, and everything's, you get on, and you're very focused, and off you go. And when you got to the top, suddenly I thought, oh my goodness, and the butterflies in my stomach, honestly, they were doing backward somersaults. And and of course he recognises that, doesn't he? He's like, whoa, what's going on here? This is amazing. And I warmed up with a double handful, thinking, crumbs, he's been very strong. And he set off out of the start box. And when I got to my first minute marker, I couldn't hear my watch. And I thought, oh God, I'm going, I've made an error here. I'm going too quickly. And looked down at my watch, and I wasn't. I was spot on. But because of the sheer noise and support and cheering and screaming and clapping that followed you the whole way round, it really was deafening. I couldn't hear my watch, which was, a matter of a few feet away from me. It was just phenomenal. But he was an absolute joy to ride from start to finish. He was keen and full of running all the way to the end. And I was incredibly proud, and what an honour and a privilege to have been there and had that experience. And as I said before, I owe Dodi everything, and Rosemary for allowing me and asking me to ride him.
Stood on a podium, winning an Olympic silver medal.
I know, phenomenal. That horse that you didn't know you didn't know whether he'd go past intermediate, and look where he took us. What an absolute superstar.
It's a very difficult question to ask, but is there a result in his career that stands out to you as the one that is exceptionally special? I imagine London does come pretty close, but what stands out for you looking back?
I think definitely London. I think Burley, when he was fifth, he was just superb there. And I know the show jumping on the final day was causing so much trouble, and the order was changing so much, and he just pinged round and made it feel so easy, and just popped his way around and left all the fences up, and it was just an amazing feeling to have ridden around that course like that, and for him to have gone so well. But I think to have won the first time at Blair, when he won the Scottish Open the first time, that was before our first team selection, and that was a really lovely moment for Rosemary, his owner and breeder, and my team, because we all shared the same dream of going to the top of the sport, and daring to be on a British team. Would that ever happen? And Rosemary was has always been so supportive and so driven, and so sort of absolutely determined and absolutely certain that it was going to happen. And I suppose that helped to drive us all. And that moment when we won up at Blair, the first time of the Scottish Open, was the first step in that on that road, I suppose. So it was very exciting for us all.
And it's rather lovely that his last year competing, 2014, he won an advance at Chatsworth, which is a pretty cool place to win an advance, and he won the CIC 3-star at Hopetoun. His competition career finished fantastically, really, didn't it?
It did, and he was getting older, and you were sort of aware that he was starting to creak a little bit, and he was the horse horses like that with such massive hearts, and wanting to always please. And he would never have known when it was time to give up. He would have just kept going. And as I suppose I needed to be a little bit of his handbrake on the cross-country course sometimes because he felt he was invincible. We had to be very sensible on finding the right timing for him. And although he finished safe and sound, he probably could have kept going longer, but it just felt the right time for him to retire and to have his last run in Yorkshire, where he was only literally a few miles away from where he was bred and spent the first few years of his life with Rosemary. He had his last run at Allerton Park in the same county that he was born and bred. And he was just picked to the post. He was second, wasn't he? Yeah. And we were just picked to the post in his final run. But I sobbed and sobbed afterwards. And I just had the most lovely, lovely round. And I remember just breaking down into tears and just being so proud and so grateful to him for everything. And it was a very emotional day, I have to say.
The very sad thing is that actually he died very quickly after that. It was almost as though he'd, gone, okay, retirement isn't for me. I've been a competition horse, I know. And yes, there are worse ways to go, I have to say, for lovely old horses.
I agree. Yes, I agree. I think he had it all planned. But it was a very different plan to what we had. We had a lovely plan for him. He was going to stay with us, and Lynn, who'd looked after him so beautifully for many, many, many years, she was going to, hack him through the winter when the weather was bad, and then he was going to have a lovely time staying with us and still being in work, and then he could have, nice holiday through the nicer weather, and then come back into work. And but he had obviously a very different plan to us. And one morning he'd eaten all of his breakfast. He'd had carrots in his breakfast, as he always did. He'd eaten it all. He was very much himself. He was very bright-eyed, and then a couple of hours later, he just didn't look quite right. And he was a horse that wasn't normally, he would never, look not normal. So we called the vet and it was all over very quickly and without pain, and all very very peaceful. And yes, he'll be looking down, supporting us from up above.
Nicola, during his career, the late stages of his career, he became so incredibly popular. I remember. Was that something that you were sort of very aware of? I mean, the reaction to him was pretty intense, wasn't it?
It was lovely and so deserved. He deserved every bit of it, because he was not, he was exhilarating to ride. He was so exciting to ride cross country. It was as if it was his birthdays and Christmases all in one when he was allowed to go cross country, as it was mine. And it was, he obviously shows that by, for people supporting and watching him go cross country. And, and crikey, he deserved all of that support, because he was such a massive character and such an honest and a giving horse. And he just displayed sheer pleasure when he was charging around the countryside, jumping these massive things, making them feel so easy. He was an absolute joy. And I think, yes, of course, you're aware that, how popular he is. And I was just aware of how lucky I was to be able to ride him.
I have to admit, I've just been looking back at some pictures of him, and you mentioned his ears a little bit earlier on in the show. These gorgeous, great big ears, but every single photo that is out there, and listeners, go and have a Google, go and look what's on the internet, because he just looks like the epitome of a horse who loves his job. Yeah, and it's absolutely just such a treat. It's so easy to see how people fell in love with him. He's obviously had a massive impact on your career, Nicola. What shaping has he given you for the future? What impact has he had? He's opened so many doors and made so much possible, and allowed me to dare to believe that I can do it. He certainly
bridged the gap for me with Mr. Bumble and Skyver getting me to badmintons and Burleys, and he bridged the gap from those competitions to British, team selection and podiums, as you mentioned earlier. Standing there on the podium at London was just phenomenally exciting, and he's just made so many things possible from there. And yeah, incredibly grateful for that.
He's been a remarkable horse, and it's certainly a horse that has stuck with me and was part of my initial love for eventing. And I'm sure many people listening to this will have loved a trip down memory lane talking about him. Nicola, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing some of your favourite Dodi memories with us.
And thank you for letting me talk about him so much.
Anytime. Listeners, we hope you've enjoyed a really special insight into Opposition Buzz. He was clear inside the time on all 4 of his championship appearances, had a team medal in each of them as well, and really was one of the true superstars of Team GBR. A big thank you to Nicola and to Catherine, and stay tuned for who we will have coming up next in the Horse Heroes series. We've got a couple of ideas, but we would love to know yours as well, so do send them in to us, and we will have another show coming your way very shortly. But thank you very much for listening. Thank you for listening to the Echo Ratings Eventing podcast. This podcast is available for free on iTunes, Spotify, Podcast Addict, or wherever you usually listen to your podcasts. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. Find us at eventingpodcast.com or search Eventing Podcast on social media.